All right, welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Usually we take on these big, kind of sprawling topics, but today we're going to do something a little different. And honestly, I'm pretty excited about it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're getting really focused, laser focused even, on just one piece of writing, a single English reading passage. And we're going to really break it down. It's like if you think about using a magnifying glass to understand how a sentence is put together, what the words are doing.
Let me dissecting it.
Exactly. So we've picked out Text9 from, get this, a master's entrance exam.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the stakes are high.
They are. But listen, if English sometimes feels like a bit of a puzzle to you, which I think it does for a lot of us, right? This is for you. We're going to help you see the patterns. And specifically in this reading passage, we'll be exploring how scientists share their work.
Okay.
And you'll be building some real confidence with what we call academic English, that kind of formal writing. So win-win.
Yeah, totally.
So just to give everyone a little bit of context, this text is all about how scientific papers get published. Now, I know that might sound a bit dry, a bit formal, but trust me, it's about a really big shift that's happening right now. And what we're going to do is take it like piece by piece, almost like we're building with Lego bricks, right? You see how each little sentence, each idea fits into the bigger picture.
I like that, the Lego analogy, yeah.
Right. And our goal is to help you have that solid understanding, that aha moment that you can then build on.
Awesome.
So before we get lost in the details, why don't you just kind of lay out the main idea for us? What's the core message of this whole article in simple terms?
Okay, so basically, this article compares the old way of publishing scientific papers to how the internet is totally changing the game. Back in the day, if a scientist made a big discovery, they would write it up all fancy and send it off to a special magazine called a journal. It was a whole process.
Right. Like imagine before the internet was basically like a giant library you could carry in your pocket. So yeah, what happened in this old school way?
Well, the article starts with, it used to be so straightforward. Straightforward here just means simple, like following a recipe with only a handful of ingredients.
No complications.
Yeah, exactly. Then it says, a team of researchers working together in the laboratory would submit the results of their research to a journal.
Okay, break that down for us.
Okay, so you've got a group of scientists. They're all working together in the lab. They do their experiments. They find something new, these results, and then they submit it. Think of it like handing in your homework, but instead of to a teacher, it's to one of these special journals.
Gotcha. So they don't just like post it on their own website or blog or whatever?
No, not at all. This is where it gets really interesting. There's this crucial step called peer review.
Ah, yes, peer review. Everyone's always talking about it, but what does it actually mean?
Well, the article says a journal editor would then remove the author's names and affiliations from the paper and send it to their peers for review. Basically, the editor takes off the scientist's name tags before sending the paper out.
So it's anonymous.
Exactly. And why do they do that? Well, so other scientists can read it without knowing who wrote it. These other scientists are their peers, other experts in the same field.
Makes sense. Like a blind taste test for science.
Yeah, a blind taste test, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
It helps to make sure that the review is fair and that the reviewers are just focusing on the science itself.
So no bias, no playing favorites.
Yeah. It's like when you get anonymous feedback on an essay from a classmate, right? You're just getting their honest opinions.
Totally. And then what? What does the editor do with all this feedback?
Well, the article goes on to say, depending on the comments received, the editor would accept the paper for publication or decline it. So basically, if the reviewers think the research is good, they say thumbs up, and the editor says, all right, we'll publish this.
They get the green light.
Exactly. But if the reviewers have, serious concerns, they might say, nah, not this time. It's kind of like getting a grade on your research paper.
Pass or fail. Okay, so let's say the paper does get published. Who actually owns this new knowledge? I mean, the scientists did the work, right?
This is where it gets a little bit tricky, and this was a big part of the traditional system. The article says, copyright rested with the journal publisher. And copyright, just so everyone's clear, is like the official ownership of something you create, like a song or a book, or in this case, a scientific paper.
So even though the scientists made the discovery, the journal owns it.
Yeah, that's how it used to work. And if other scientists wanted to read this new research, they would have to subscribe to the journal, like paying a fee to get access, like a magazine subscription.
Right, like those academic journals weren't free at the library. You had to, like you said, your university would have to pay to get access to them.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the used to be. But the article doesn't stop there. We've got this dramatic, no longer at the start of the second paragraph.
Yeah, No longer. Just those two words. They signal a big shift, like a traffic light, suddenly changing from green to red. Something is different now.
It's like, hold up, everything you just learned, it's changing.
Right. And the big question is, what's causing this change? The article says, and this is a long one, the internet and pressure from funding agencies who are questioning why commercial publishers are making money from government-funded research by restricting access to it is making access to scientific results a reality. Wow. Okay, so that's a mouthful, even for me. So let's break it down into smaller bites.
Yeah.
What are the main players here?
I was going to say, it's like a winding road. I need you to, give me the turn.
Absolutely. So the main forces driving this change are, first, the internet, obviously.
Internet changes everything, right?
Right. And second, pressure from funding agencies.
Okay, and what are these funding agencies doing?
They're basically saying, hey, why should big companies, these are what the article calls commercial publishers, why should they be making tons of money by limiting who can read research that we, the government, paid for? You see, a lot of scientific research is funded by governments.
Yeah, taxpayers are footing the bill for a lot of this research, right?
Exactly. And these funding agencies are pushing for open access, meaning they want everyone to be able to read the results.
Okay, that makes sense. So, to be clear, restricting access basically just means making it hard for people to see the research, right?
Exactly. Like putting up a paywall on a website. You have to pay to get in and see the good stuff. But the internet has made it possible to share information much more easily. It's like sending an email versus having to mail a physical letter.
Right, snail mail versus email.
Exactly.
Okay, so internet makes things easy to share. Funding agencies want open access. What happens next?
Well, the article brings up this report from the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. It's like a club of lots of different countries who get together to study and figure out important stuff.
Okay, and what does their report have to say?
Well, it describes the far-reaching consequences of this shift towards open access.
Far-reaching consequences. What's that mean exactly?
It means big changes, important effects that will stick around for a long time, like when you drop a stone in a pond and the ripples go out and out.
Ooh, I like that image.
Yeah. It's not just a small change, it's a big deal. And the report itself, it makes for heavy reading for publishers. But heavy reading doesn't mean the report is physically heavy, like a big, thick book. It means the findings of the report are probably not welcome news for these publishers.
Yeah.
Because they've been making a lot of money, what they call handsome profits, under this old system.
Right. They're not going to be thrilled about potentially losing money, are they?
Probably not. But the report isn't just about money, is it? It goes deeper than that.
What do you mean?
It's not just about who gets paid. It's about a fundamental change in how science works, how it progresses. That's what they mean by scientific endeavor.
Right.
The whole effort of doing science, like climbing a mountain. It's a long, hard process.
Right. It's about the whole journey, not just who profits at the end.
Exactly.
Okay, so the third paragraph really gets into why this open access, this wider access to scientific findings is so important.
Yeah. And it starts by saying the value of knowledge and the return on the public investment in research depends, in part, upon wide distribution and ready access.
Okay, there's a lot packed in there. What's it really saying?
Well, think of it like this. For knowledge to be truly valuable, for us to actually benefit from the research that we, the public, have paid for through our taxes, right?
Right.
The results of that research need to be spread far and wide, like scattering seeds,
Right.
wide distribution, right? And they need to be easy to get a hold of, ready access. It can't be locked behind paywalls or expensive subscriptions.
So the more people who can access the research, the more it can be used and built upon and actually make a difference.
Exactly. Like planting seeds, the more you distribute them and the easier they are to grow, the bigger and better the harvest you get. And the article then points out that it is big business. This whole world of scientific publishing, it's a huge industry. It's worth billions of dollars. They mention like thousands of publishers putting out over 1 million articles each year in all these different journals.
Wow. It's easy to forget that all this academic stuff is actually a massive business, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
So we have this big established industry built around this traditional way of doing things. But then the internet comes along and things start to really shift. The fourth paragraph dives into that.
Right, and the OECD report found that, get this, something like 75% of scholarly journals, those serious academic ones we've been talking about, are now online.
That's a huge chunk of them.
It is. And with this move online, entirely new business models are emerging, like completely new ways of doing things.
Yeah. So it's not just that the old system is online now, but that totally new approaches are popping up.
Exactly. And the report identified three main models.
Three main models. Okay, lay 'em on us.
So the first one they call the big deal. It's where university libraries pay for access to like a whole bunch of journals online. It's like a bulk discount. They call them site licensing agreements.
Okay, so instead of each person subscribing to each journal, the university just gets a big package deal for everyone to access.
Exactly. It's like a family sharing a streaming service. You pay one price and everyone gets to watch.
I love that analogy, like a Netflix for science papers.
Yeah. All right, so that's the big deal.
Yeah.
The second model is called open access publishing. And this is a really key one to understand.
Yeah, open access, we hear that a lot these days. Break it down for us.
So the article says, it is typically supported by asking the author or his employer to pay for the paper to be published. So instead of the readers paying to access the research, the scientists themselves or their universities, they pay up front to make the article free for everyone to read.
Oh, interesting. So flips the script, right? The people who want to share the knowledge are the ones paying instead of the people who want to read it.
Right. It's like paying a toll to open a road so everyone can use it for free.
I get it. So everyone benefits in the end. Okay, so what's the third way of doing things?
The third model is called open access archives. These are basically like online libraries where organizations like universities or those big international labs, they support what are called institutional repositories. So it's like a special library just for the research that's come out of that university or that lab. And anyone can access it for free.
So it's like a way to showcase all the amazing work being done at a particular institution.
Exactly. And then the article mentions that there are also hybrids. These are like combinations of the different models. So for example, you might have what's called delayed open access, where the journal is only available to subscribers for, say, 6 months or a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, boom, it becomes free for everyone to read.
So there's this like waiting period and then everyone gets access.
Interesting. Okay, so lots of new ways to share research findings. And the last sentence of this paragraph, it almost hints that even the way research is checked, like the peer review process itself, might be changing too.
Yeah, totally. It says, all this could change the traditional form of the peer review process, at least for the publication of papers. So basically, the way scientists double-check each other's work, that might evolve too in this new digital world.
Exciting times.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've walked through this entire article piece by piece like we said we would. Now, I think it would be helpful to actually look at some of the questions that you might encounter after reading a passage like this on a test.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so the first question, it says, in the first paragraph the author discusses, and then it gives you 4 options to choose from. How should someone approach a question like this? Okay, so the most important thing is to go back and read just that first paragraph again really carefully. Don't worry about the rest of the text for now. Then look at those 4 choices and see which one best matches the main idea of that first paragraph. Like, what was the author focusing on in that section?
Makes sense. So don't get distracted by the other paragraphs. Just focus on the one the question is asking about.
Exactly.
All right, let's look at the options for this one. Option A says, the background information of journal editing. What do you think?
Well, editing is mentioned as part of the publishing process, but it's not the main point of the whole paragraph, is it?
Yeah, it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Right. Option B says the publication routine of laboratory reports. Again, that feels too narrow. The paragraph talks about research in general, not just things that happen in labs.
It's more about the big picture. Okay, option C says the relations of authors with journal publishers. That's touched on, right? Like with submitting their work.
Yeah, but it's not the core idea of the whole paragraph.
Yeah. All right, and finally, option D says the traditional process of journal publication. What do you think?
That sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole first paragraph basically lays out the steps that researchers used to take to get their work published, right?
Yeah, it's like a step-by-step guide.
Exactly. So D is the best answer.
Great. Let's try another one. Question 2 says, which of the following is true of the OECD report? Now, where should someone look in the text to answer this?
Okay, so the OECD report is mentioned in a couple of places. You'll find it in the second paragraph and also the fourth paragraph. So you want to focus your attention on those sections. What does the text actually say about the OECD report and its findings?
Right. Don't go off on tangents. Stick to what the text tells you. All right. Option A says, it criticizes government-funded research. Did the report say that?
Not quite. Remember, it questioned the profits of commercial publishers who are making money from this research. It doesn't criticize the research itself, just how some companies are profiting from it.
Okay, so that's tricky. It's about being precise. Option B says it introduces an effective means of publication. What do we think?
Well, it definitely talks about new models, but does it outright say that they're effective?
Yeah, that's a strong word, isn't it? Effective means they're definitely working well. I don't think the text goes that far.
Exactly. It's more about presenting different approaches.
Okay, so B is out. Option C says it upsets profit-making journal publishers. Now this one. I remember a certain phrase.
Me too. Remember how it said the report makes heavy reading for publishers who have been making handsome profits?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like they're too happy about it.
Yeah, that sounds like it would ruffle some feathers.
Right. It strongly suggests they wouldn't be thrilled about these changes.
Okay, so C seems promising. And lastly, option D says it benefits scientific research considerably. This is a tricky one because intuitively, easier access to research seems like a good thing, right?
Yeah, you'd think so, but the text doesn't directly say how much it benefits research.
Right, so it doesn't use a word like considerably, which means a lot, a significant amount.
Exactly. So while it might be true that the report suggests benefits, C is the option that is most directly supported by the text.
That makes sense. It's all about finding the answer that best fits the evidence in the passage. All right, on to question 3. This one says, according to the text, online publication is significant in that. Where in the text should someone look for the answer to this question?
Okay, so online publication and its importance, that's something that's talked about throughout the later paragraphs, especially from the fourth one onwards.
So we need to look at that whole section where it describes the different models.
Exactly.
Let's see what the options are. Option A says it provides easier access to scientific results. Now, this seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it? I mean, the whole point of online publication is to make research more accessible, right?
Yeah, the article keeps emphasizing that the internet and online models are making it easier for people to actually get to the research.
Right. Okay, what about option B? It says it brings huge profits to scientific researchers.
Now, I don't recall reading anything about scientists getting rich from online publication.
Me neither. The article talks about the profits of the publishers, and then there's the mention of costs for the authors, but nothing about scientists making huge profits from online publication specifically.
So B seems unlikely. What about C? It says, it emphasizes the crucial role of scientific knowledge.
I mean, that's definitely true in a general sense, but I don't think that's the specific significance of online publication that the article is highlighting.
Yeah, it seems a bit too broad. The article really zeroes in on access to knowledge as the key change.
Exactly.
Okay, last one. Option D says, it facilitates public investment in scientific research. Now, I don't recall anything about that being a direct result of online publication.
Me neither.
So out of all those options, A really seems to be the best fit, right? It's the most accurate based on what the text tells us.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, 2 more to go. Question 4 says, with the open access publishing model, the author of a paper is required to. Now, where do we find information about this specific publishing model?
You'll find that in the fourth paragraph, where it describes the different models, and open access is one of them.
Perfect. Let's see what they're asking. Option A says, cover the cost of its publication. Now that rings a bell.
Yeah, I remember that. The text specifically says that open access publishing is typically supported by asking the author or his employer to pay for the paper to be published.
So the author, or their university or lab, they fit the bill up front. That's a pretty clear match.
Yeah, I think A is our answer.
All right, what about the other options? Option B says, subscribe to the journal publishing it. Now that doesn't sound right, does it?
No, that's the old model, the opposite of open access.
Yeah, if it's open access, the reader shouldn't have to subscribe. Okay, option C says, allow other online journals to use it freely. Maybe, but is that a requirement?
It's more of a possible consequence, right?
Hmm.
But the article is very specific about the author being asked to pay for open access.
Right. And option D says, complete the peer review before submission. Now, peer review, that's part of the process for pretty much any journal, whether it's open access or not, right?
Yeah, it's not unique to the open access model, so A is definitely the best fit.
All right, last question. This one asks us to zoom out again and look at the big picture. It says, which of the following best summarizes the text? So we have to think about the main point of the whole article. What's the core message?
Right, what's the takeaway?
Exactly. Okay, option A says, the internet is posing a threat to publishers. Well, we definitely talked about how publishers are concerned about losing profits, right?
Yeah, but the article doesn't just focus on that. It also talks about the benefits of open access and all these new models that are emerging.
So it's not just about doom and gloom for publishers, it's about a wider shift that's happening. All right, option B says a new mode of publication is emerging. That sounds pretty accurate, doesn't it?
It does. The whole point of the article is to show how things are moving away from that traditional way of doing things and towards something new.
Yeah, and it highlights those three new models that are developing. Okay, option C says authors welcome the new channel for publication. Now, do we know how authors feel about it?
The article doesn't explicitly say. It focuses more on the changes themselves and the different players involved.
Right. So that's an assumption. And finally, option D says publication is rendered easier by online service.
It's true that online services make things easier, but is that the main point?
I think it's about the change in the system itself, not just the ease of use.
Exactly. So B seems like the most comprehensive summary. It captures the essence of what the article is all about.
Wonderful. I think we nailed those questions. Now, stepping back for a second, what are some of the biggest challenges that you think someone learning English might run into with a text like this? What are the tricky bits?
Okay, so I think one of the biggest hurdles is those long, complex sentences. Like that one in the second paragraph about the internet and the funding agencies. Oh my goodness, it's like a marathon.
It was a doozy.
It was. And for someone who's still learning English, those can feel really overwhelming.
Yeah, like you're getting lost in a forest of words.
Exactly. Yeah. So what's the key? Well, you have to first find the main subject and the main verb. That's the core of the sentence, the heart of the action. In that really long sentence, the core is the internet is making access a reality.
Strip away all the extra stuff.
Right. And then all the other stuff, you'd like branches coming off that core that give you more information, explaining things in more detail. But the core is what you need to grab onto first.
Okay, that's a great tip. What else?
Vocabulary is huge, of course. Words like submit, copyright, subscribe, peer. These are really common in academic English, but they might not be words you use every day.
Yeah, they're like the special tools you need for this kind of writing.
Exactly. So it's really important to make a note of these words, look them up if you need to, and try to understand how they're being used in the context of the article.
Because a word can have slightly different meanings depending on how it's used, right?
Absolutely. And then some of the ideas themselves can be a bit abstract, like return on investment, or all these different flavors of open access.
It's not always obvious what those things mean in practice, right? Like, what does it actually mean for a scientist who just made a discovery that copyright rested with the journal publisher? What are the real-world implications of that?
Exactly. So with something like copyright, it can help to think of it in terms of something you're more familiar with. Like you own the photos you take, right? If someone wants to use your photos in a magazine or something, they usually need your permission. Well, in the old system, the journal basically became the owner of the scientists' research photos. Their paper and other researchers or libraries, they had to pay to view them.
Like paying for a ticket to an exhibition.
Yeah. And open access is changing that whole ownership arrangement. It's about making those photos, the research findings, freely available for everyone to see and use.
Ah, I see. So analogies can really help make those abstract ideas click. What else? Any other pitfalls to watch out for?
Oh, definitely. Watch out for those expressions that might have a different meaning than you think. Like we talked about heavy reading, how it doesn't mean the book is physically heavy. It means the content is unpleasant or difficult for a certain group to accept.
So much nuance.
So much.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to not just read the words, but try to understand what they're really doing in the sentence.
Right. Think about the bigger picture, the context. Okay, so just to recap for everyone, your advice is to break down those long sentences. Don't be afraid to read a section multiple times.
Rereading is your friend.
Absolutely. And really focus on understanding the basic meaning of the words and ideas before trying to, jump into deep analysis.
Exactly. Lay that foundation first. And remember, improving your reading comprehension. It's like building a muscle. The more you practice with different kinds of text, the stronger you'll become.
You'll be able to tackle anything. All right, well, I think this deep dive into Text9 has been incredibly illuminating. We covered how scientific publishing used to work, how the internet is changing everything, and some really helpful strategies for approaching those tricky exam questions.
And, it's important to remember that understanding a text like this isn't just about getting the right answers on a test. It's about opening up new ways of thinking, new areas of knowledge.
It's about expanding your horizons.
Exactly. And think about it. You find information online every day, right? News articles, blogs, social media posts. The changes happening in scientific publishing are all part of this bigger picture of how we share information in our digital age. And that raises some really important questions, like who gets to access these important discoveries? Who benefits? Those are things worth thinking about.
Absolutely. Food for thought. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this super focused deep dive. We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic, but until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those brains buzzing.
See you next time.